what are these two strips at the end of each aileron? They don't seem to do anything. They don't move or anything. The answer is coming up. Greetings, fellow simmer, and welcome to the reaction review with me, GripperSim, in sexy 4K cha-cha-cha. Although I'm using the PPL syllabus as a reference for these tutorials, I've simplified a lot here, and I must remind you that this video is not for real-life flying, obviously. Well, why? Well, there's no feel, there's no seat of your pants feeling. You've no peripheral vision, etc, etc. And of course, there's no risk in a flight simulator, is there? Today, we're going to do exercise 5, taxiing. Well, I might skip that because it's pretty self-explanatory. In the real life, when you do exercise 5, it's really about safety, you know, about making sure there's no one around the prop and not taxiing too fast. But this is a flight simulator, so we can taxi as fast as we like. So then we move on to exercise 6, which is straight and level flight. Then we go on to exercise 7, which is climbing. And then we go on to exercise 8, which is descending and gliding. Now, I know you're probably frustrated going, I want to learn how to land, but if you master these few exercises, trust me, it's all built into these exercises. It's going to teach you how to take off and land, and that's coming up in exercise 12 and 13. So, let's go into exercise 6, straight and level flight. Definition of straight and level flight is constant heading, constant altitude. How do I keep my constant altitude? Very similar, the same thing actually as what we spoke about last week. If you watched Effects and Controls, that's exercises 1 to 4. Have a look at the playlists. And what we're doing is we're looking at the horizon here, and we're pushing the horizon 4 inches above the end of the cowling. Okay, that's about 4 inches. I'm just keeping that picture. Look inside. We're around about 0. Okay, we're around about 0. Now, the actual simulator is much more sensitive than the real thing. So if you could do this in a flight simulator, you know, you're gonna have no problems flying a real airplane. So I'm just turning a little bit more to the left here. So this picture is very important. Why am I turning? I'm just getting a heading of west here, and I'm picking a feature. It's a little bit of a dip here, kind of, and I'm keeping that in the same place in the windscreen. So I'm going to go here. Right, so I'm just looking at that little point down there if there's anything to look at. And if I continue flying towards any point on the horizon, I'll keep a constant heading. In this case, West 270. Now, I'm just looking out and I keep this heading. So where your eyes go, they go from here to here, and you adjust back up here. Right? But you're looking outside 90% of the time. Now, I do understand in a flight simulator you'll be looking in more, but in real flying, you're looking at 90% of the time. Now I'm trimmed, so I've let my hand go of the control column. All I got to do is gently steer. It's very sensitive, very subtle. If I apply a bit of back pressure, nose goes up. A bit of forward pressure, nose goes down. So it's really very sensitive. But that's a good thing, because you've got to do less work, don't you? So that's straight and level flight. But there's a little bit more to it. Let's reduce power. So I'm reducing power, my RPM in a mountain. By the way, before I reduce my RPM, we cruise at 2200 RPM. I'm just a bit under that, but around about there is fine. That's what we cruise at. Okay. Now remember I said last week, or should I say last time, if you add power, the nose goes up. Okay. If you remove power, the nose goes down. Because if I add power, as we said last time, it puts more of a downforce on the tail. If I remove power, it removes the downforce on the tail. It's a balancing effect. Okay, so I'm just keeping an eye on my altitude. I just dropped 50 feet there, big deal. I just climbed back up. So I'm slowly climbing back up here, just sneaking it back up. So you want to maintain your altitude as best you can. Just keep correcting yourself. There we go, I've set that. Now, let's slow down a bit. So I'm removing some power. Now what happens when I remove power from Effects and Controls? As you did last time, the nose goes down, we start to descend. But we want to do straight and level flight, so let's not descend. Eyes outside. Now we're holding the nose up, right? We're adjusting that picture from 4 inches. I'm going to continuously apply back pressure in the control column, so I don't descend. Now, what's happening here is I'm applying back pressure, so the angle of attack is increased from the wings. Now the angle of attack, I'll explain that some other time in more detail. But I'm getting more lift from the wings by applying back pressure. Now, if I let go of the control column now, because I've just got that now, I've got 0 feet a minute, but our picture has changed. So the horizon is maybe half an inch above the end of the cowling now. So if I let go, it goes down. So what have you got to do? You got to trim. So I'm trimming back. Trimming is very important. It is everything to do with general aviation flying. Trimming, and the jets, trimming is vital. There we go. So I'm trimming up here, trim, trim, trim. So always trim. Now I've let go of the control column. Okay? And I'm gently steering it. Gently steering it around. So there you go. So when you remove power in straight and level flight, you've got to create a higher angle of attack to create more lift from the wings. But when you create more lift from the wings, you get more drag, yes? And I've removed power from the prop. So we've kept our 7,000 feet roughly, but we're now flying at 60 knots. Whereas before we were flying at 90 knots. Now, let's do the converse. Let's add power. Let's add back to cruise. Or let's go full power, right? So I'll go full power, just almost full power. What happens when I add full power? The nose goes up. So I don't want to climb. I've got to apply forward pressure. So I've got a 2400 RPM now this time. A little bit faster. So I'm applying forward pressure on the control column. Under acceleration, I'm continuing to apply forward pressure on the control column. And what do I want to do? I want to trim. Yes, I want to trim forward. Whoops, see what happens when you look inside? So I'm applying back pressure and I'm trimming forward now. Now I'm trimming forward. So I just want to get that picture, that new picture, okay? So now it might be 5 inches. It might be 5 inch, might be 5 inches from the horizon to the cowling. So you might have a little bit more of a nose down attitude because we're going faster. So any time you adjust the configuration of the aircraft, meaning power, flaps, landing gear, anything like that, you got to retrim. So now I've got it pretty much 7,000 feet. There we go. And we're going at almost 100 knots now. So I'll go back to cruise, 2200 RPM. What's going to happen when I will go back to cruise? Well, the nose is going to want to go down, but I'm not going to let it go down. I'm going to apply back pressure, trim back, and do it again. So there you go. I won't bore you to tears with that. Now, what happens if I lower flaps? Well, first of all, before you lower flaps, just adjusting my heading and retrimming. Sorry, not my heading, my attitude. I'm retrimming, trim. Now, I'm going to lower some flaps, but first we've got to make sure we're under this wide arc. See this wide arc? In real life, you can't lower the flaps until you're below the wide arc. That's called VFE. That's the velocity flap extension speed. So I'm going to slow down a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of power off. 2000 RPM will do. Okay, don't want to go too slow. And again, I'm just retrimming. So this is what you practice. You need to sit down and practice it and set up your trim controls. So there we go. I'm pretty much level there again. I'm not really concerned about my altitude anymore. I just want to show you the effects. Now, I'm going to lower 10 flaps. Make sure I just get level here. I'm just trimming up. So sensitive on the computer. Really is. Okay, so let's zoom in here. And let's lower 10 flaps. I've got to be quick here because the nose is going to go up straight away. 10 flaps thereabouts. Oh, there we go. Looking outside. Look, we're ballooning. Remember that from last time? But no, I don't want to balloon. I'm applying forward pressure. Remember, effects of controls, when you lower flaps, the aircraft balloons. Now, I'm just readjusting my picture outside to keep it level. Now, we were about 80 knots, weren't we? So now I got to trim again. Because we've lowered the flaps a certain amount, let me just give you a picture of those. They're there. Okay, they're lower 10 degrees. 1, 2, 3. We're flying slower. So you want to stop that ballooning when you lower flaps, don't you? Especially when you're coming into land, because that you feel, if you don't know this, it messes everything up. So what you want to anticipate is that when you lower the flaps, the nose wants to go up and the aircraft wants to climb and balloon, and it will slow down as well. Let's lower 20 degrees of flaps now. There we go. Up it goes. I stop it, apply forward pressure. So I didn't anticipate it there because I wanted you to see that the aircraft will balloon. So you anticipate it. Now we're flying even slower because those flaps are hanging out. They're just hanging out. I'm trimming again. You got to trim because we changed the configuration. Trimming nose up. There we go. Ooh, the controls are very sloppy. Interesting, isn't it? We'll be talking about why that is on the next few exercises in the next video. Okay, so yeah, it's going to be on the horizon. There we go. So we've got 0 feet a minute. The nose is on the horizon. We're very, very slow. 40, just above 40 knots. Very close to what's called the stall speed. just add a bit of power. I'm going to add power now to overcome the drag of the flaps. Because I don't want to fly too slow, because look at them, they're like saucers hanging out, stopping all, you know, causing drag. Let's go back to my view. So I've added a bit of power. I'll add a good bit of power. So look at the power I've got to add, guys. Look at the power just to stop slowing down so much. So, again, play around with lowering flaps and you'll be an expert at flying manually. There we go, we got a bit of power back. There we go. That's a bit more like it. So it's a bit more sensitive now, see? A bit more sensitive. So that's flaps. Let's take the flaps up. I'm going to take them all up just to accentuate it. In real life, you only take one stage at a time. So as the nose wants to go down now, see, it wants to go down because we're sinking. Remember from effects controls, we sink, we take the flaps up. So I'm applying back pressure so we don't descend this time. And of course, I got to retrim. Let's just get back to 0 there before we go to the next exercise. And folks, that is straight and level flight, exercise 6. Exercise 7, the climb. We are at 5,000 feet, which is actually about 1,000 feet above the ground. Now, you're probably wondering what's 5,000 feet? Well, that's 5,000 feet above sea level. That's what we're flying at. The ground is 1,000 feet below us, and then the sea is another few thousand feet below that, because Sedona's high. Okay, so, climbing. A few things. It's always the same. Power, attitude, trim in the climb. So you add power, get your attitude for your speed, and then you trim. And then to level off from the climb, it's attitude, then power, then trim. So let's go through that. Now, we always climb with full power, okay? Always. If you're kind of sneaking it like I am, we're kind of descending a bit, so I'm going to sneak it up a little bit, 50 feet to get to my 5,000 feet. That's fine, because your speed doesn't vary that much. So if you're anything over than 100 feet, use full power to climb. Okay, so let's put full power. Full power. Now, what happens when we put in full power? The nose goes up, doesn't it? Now, I'm just going to adjust my view. There we go, we can see the end of the cowling. Now, I'm going to put my attitude, I'm looking outside. I'm going to put my attitude there. I'm putting the nose about 4 inches above the horizon, and I'm holding it there. The speed is slowly bleeding off, and it's going to stop bleeding off until it gets at 70 knots, because I'm flying by my attitude. It just happens to be about 8 or 9 degrees on the artificial horizon there. So that is my picture. But look outside, and we just hold that picture. That's it. Now we got to trim. Okay, so if I let go, the nose goes down, right? So I'm going to trim. So hold it, bring it back up to your attitude first. Don't race for the trimmer. Hold it there. Recognize you're applying back pressure in the control column, or how much, and trim. There we go. Now, I'm a little bit slow. I'm about 65 knots, so I lower the nose a bit. So we're pitching for speed, just like in effects of controls. So I want my 70 knots. And it's pretty much, you're not going to be exact all the time, but around about there. Now, I'm trimming, and it's an art. It takes practice. You've got to practice this. So we're climbing at 70 knots. Why 70 knots? Well, 70 knots is called VY, and VY is your best rate of climb. In other words, in the vertical speed indicator here, if I just adjust the your picture here, that's better. We're getting about 500-600 feet a minute. Get rid of the mouse. Now, to level off from the climb, always decide what altitude you're going to level off at. We'll say 6,200 feet. I'm lowering the nose to get my 70 knots, so about 20 feet before, okay, in this particular aircraft, I'm going to level off. So it's attitude, back to straight and level. Put the horizon 2 inches above the cowling. Power, but wait, let it accelerate first. Okay, power back to 2200 RPM. Now the nose wants to go up. I have to apply forward pressure now, so I can trim if you need to. So there you go. To climb, it's power, attitude, trim. To level off in the climb, it's attitude, then reduce your power, and then trim again. And we're back at 6,200 feet. Now, there's also another climb speed. There's a climb speed called 60 knots. I'll show you that very quickly. So full power, once again, power, attitude, putting the horizon 4 inches below the end of the cowling. Holding it there, it'll slowly come back. It happens to be about 9 degrees in the artificial horizon, and we hold it there. There we go. Pretty much. pretty much right. That's 70 knots. So now let's go for 60. Let's hold it on the 10-degree line. So I'm putting the horizon 6 inches below the end of the cowling. As we see it, that's the white line there. So that happens to be 10 degrees on the artificial horizon. But we're looking outside. That's how you do it in real life. So there, it's about 60 knots now. That's called VX. It's the shortest, should I say, it's the best angle of climb. So it'll get you away from the ground in the shortest distance. We use this for short field takeoffs to avoid the tree at the end of the runway, which is probably at 50 feet. Brilliant. So leveling off, that's 60 knots. So to level off, attitude. Be patient, let it accelerate. Power, back to 2200 RPM, and then trim. I'm trimming forward now because the nose wants to go up. And there we go, we've leveled off. Exercise 8, descending. To start a normal descent, it's power first, then attitude, then trim. Always the same way in real life in a prop airplane. Now, also when we descend, we want a speed. Let's say 70 knots. 70 knots is a good speed for this aircraft because it's the approach speed of this aircraft. So, first of all, I'm going to reduce power and amount. I'm reducing power and the nose wants to go down. So the nose slowly goes down, see? Now, I don't want it to go, I want 70 knots, right? So I'm going to hold the nose level until the airspeed drops. See, I've got my attitude for straight and level flight there until I get 70 knots. So I'm applying back pressure. Right, so power's gone. Then attitude, so the power's at 70 now. I'm going to lower the nose with 70 knots. So I'm going to pitch for 70 knots. Pitch for speed. There we go, we got 70 knots, then trim. So power, then attitude, then trim. So I'm trimming now. Now I can let go of the control column and I can find my fingertips. So at that power setting, which is 1700 RPM, I'm descending at 300-400 feet a minute. Roughly. Now it's 2, okay? So 200-300 feet a minute. And that's a good, nice descent. And that's our approach speed, incidentally. Look dead ahead here, right? If we kept going in this trajectory, we'd end up here. Let's say the airfield, the threshold of the airfield's down here, for example. Well, what do? Reduce more power. So I'm reducing more power. The nose wants to go down, but I'm not going to let it go down. I'm going to hold the nose at the previous attitude until I get 70 knots. Now, you see, I've got to lower the nose. I've got to lower the nose to keep my 70 knots. So I'm lowering my nose with the 70 knots. And now our aiming point is about here, if we kept going in this trajectory. So power for rate of descent. Pitch for speed. To level off from the climb, which we'll do now, we always decide on an altitude to level off. So let's say 5,400. So about 50 feet before or 20 feet before, it's power back to 2200 RPM, which is our cruise. That brings the nose up. We got our attitude for cruise. Hold that attitude. And then the nose wants to go up. So I'm going to trim forward. Or trim nose down. And there we go. Keep that attitude. Now, that's all well and good. What about the glide? Well, the glide, usually in the exercises, you'll take all the power back. So we'll take all the power back. Now, when we're doing the glide, we're simulating an engine failure, if you like. So I want to hold the nose to for my speed. So what's my best glide speed in a Cessna 152? It's 60 knots exactly. So I'm holding the nose until I get 60 knots in the glide, okay? Now, carpet should be out. I'm ignoring carpet just to show you this, okay, because I'm not flying a real aircraft. So I'll pull the carpet for those of you who are going to go in the comments, oh, I don't know about carpet, you don't know what you're doing, okay. So carpet, by the way, just as I brought it up, you always have carpet hot when you go below 2000 RPM or 1900 RPM. Always have it hot, but that's not good. That's another day's work. I'm going to have a separate video about the carpet. So there we are, 60 knots, and we're descending at 500-600 feet a minute. And that's the best glide speed in a real aircraft. Let's see if 55 knots gives us. So we can't do this because we're going to stretch the glide. You should start descending more 55 knots. So let's see how realistic this flight simulator is. So we're stretching the glide. It should go more than 600 feet a minute. And it isn't. So it's just one of those things that's not realistic. They don't always get it perfectly right. So now I'm at 50 knots and I'm getting 400 feet a minute. There you go. Flight simulators aren't always exact. So let's say the airport's ahead. So let's go around. So I'm going to add full power. The nose wants to come up. I want to climb away at 60 knots. So I'm pitching for speed again. I got to lower the nose. Power comes with carb when you put it in. It's just I don't have the controls with me here. I have to use the mouse. And 60 knots. What's the 60 knots? The best angle of climb gets you away from the ground the shortest distance, and that's what we use for our go around speed, 60 knots initially. And there we go. So with climbing and descending, you'll see the theme here. It's all about speed control. Pitch for speed, power for rate of descent. Now we've done straight and level flight, we've done climbing, and we've done descending. What do you do in the circuit? You take off, you climb, you go downwind, your straight and level flight, and you descend for your landing. A descent. So we're getting close, lads. We're getting close, everybody. So what are these metal and plastic strips coming off the end of each aileron? These are called static strips. When the airfoil moves through the air, you can get a build-up of static electricity. Now, if you were kids, if you remember, you'd rub your hand on a carpet and you'd tip somebody and get a spark. Now, all the fuel is in the wings, so we want to get rid of all that static build-up. All the static electricity comes out those strips and is neutralized to the atmosphere. On Friday, I'll be talking about the Microsoft update. Go with stealth.